Hi, welcome to Life Lounge. My name's Victoria and tonight I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about how to eat healthily on a budget. The three main aims for this evening are to help banish boredom with food and to stop you going for that last minute takeaway when you are feeling like you just cannot be bothered to cook. And ultimately it's about saving money and reducing waste. So I'm going to give you my top 10 tips and I'll be around at the end of the video in the Life Lounge to answer any questions that you may have. So please feel free to store up your questions and ask anything at the end. I'm happy to give loads of practical tips and maybe help find solutions to problems that you've got. The first tip is know your budget and stick to it. Rich did a Life Lounge a few weeks back on home budgeting and he had a brilliant spreadsheet that we use. And this is what I use to try and keep myself on track and make sure that I don't overspend. I have a monthly amount every month that is for food and groceries and things like that. And Rich gives me a really generous amount and my job is to make sure that I don't go over the budget basically and spend as little of it as possible. Sometimes there are weeks that are heavier financially than other weeks, and I'll go through some of that a bit later and how it works practically. But the best tip here is as well, keep a running track of what you're spending. I used to keep it in my head and I fell apart and I used to always overspend. So bizarrely, I have a spreadsheet that I use to just keep a track of what I'm spending and I just tick it off when we go through our budget each month. So that's tip number one. Happy to share that with you if you want. The second tip is shop around, but don't drive yourself mad. There was a season in life when I was going to Home Bargains for this and the supermarket for that and the butcher's for the other, and I ended up doing about 5 or 6 different shops and I sent myself crazy chasing after a bargain, and that's really not necessary. I have got a few different suppliers that I use, so we bake our own bread, I get bread from the mill. I've got a greengrocer that delivers fresh fruit and veg twice a week to me and dairy stuff too. And then I just get everything else from the supermarket or the butcher. I tend to stick to one supermarket because I get to know what the prices are and I'm able to kind of guesstimate what the weekly shop's going to come to when I'm doing the shopping. The other thing I would say is know the season you're in. So when I had 2 very small children, I completely did all of my shopping online. And actually in current COVID days, I'm doing all of my shopping online again. There have been seasons when I've gone to the supermarket and I've been able to browse and go and buy the best bargains. Just know the season you're in and that will stop you falling into any pitfalls and overspending. The other thing when you're doing your supermarket shopping, if it's not on the list, it's not going in. I'm going to talk a bit about planning our meals, but you need to have a shopping list when you do your shopping. And if it's not on the list, it's not going in, which prevents children or husbands sneaking things into the trolley that really aren't accounted for in your weekly budget. So tip number 3 is have your store cupboard heroes. Here is my store cupboard. It's looking pretty full at the moment because we're coming to the end of week 2 in our month. And I tend to, as I said earlier, there are some weeks where I spend a bit more on food just because of the scale of economy, and it's cheaper to buy 4 tins of tomato than 1 single tin of tomato. So this is why it's looking fairly full. I've kind of filled up so I know that I've got some items in there that are going to last me through. There are certain things in there that I will never run out of, like rice and pasta. I've always got different oils and vinegars, and I keep those rolling and topping them up as I go. Get to know what your essential items are and get to know what you need to be able to do some emergency meals. When lockdown happened, we weren't allowed to go out to the shops, and I had enough to kind of keep us going with the freezer and the store cupboard for a couple of weeks. It wasn't very interesting, but it was food. So I'm not ashamed to admit that I really like food. Food for me is a creative outlet, and I enjoy the process of cooking food probably a bit more than I actually enjoy eating it. So my tip number 4 is invest in some good cookbooks. I love browsing cookbooks. Like I said, I'm a bit of a foodie, bit of a geek, but you won't go far wrong if you get hold of a couple of really good cookbooks. My top recommendations are Jamie Oliver. He's got Save and Ministry of Food. These are brilliant books. This one teaches you how to build food around a budget. This one's really good if you're not too confident in the kitchen. It has some really good basic meals in there that are super tasty. My other top chef to go through is Miguel Barkley. His £1 meal range is excellent. If there is ever too much month at the end of my money, I always go to these cookbooks because they really are £1 or less a portion, and that is just golden if you're trying to stick to a budget. And tip number 5 is devise 10 or so go-to recipes that you learn by heart or that you're really confident cooking. 10 recipes actually will give you probably 2 weeks worth of meals, and a rotation of 2 weeks worth of meals will hold off the boredom. Now if you want to get really clever, what you can do as well is you could take maybe meat and tomato sauce that you would use for a spaghetti bolognese, and then use that in all sorts of different recipes like lasagna or cannelloni, or you could do a tomato sauce that you could add for pizza bases or a pasta sauce. There's loads that you can do, and that feeds in a bit nicely to one of the later tips on batch cooking. So my 6th tip is plan your meals. I've got a number of different ways that I do it. At the moment, I use a sheet here, and hopefully a picture will pop up. I just put in each day what I'm going to be preparing, and I do it with my diary. So if I've got a really busy night coming up, I just plan a really simple meal, or I plan something from the freezer. I also have this weekly planner here that's got my meal ideas. And what I'll do is I'll have different nights of the week with different types of meals. So then that just stops me having to try and remember lots of different meals. It's just there. So I just will pick from a list that's pre-chosen. I also get my family to say what they fancy that week. So then they're not getting bored as well. And it saves me having to think of a meal. Tip number 6 leads well onto tip number 7. Plan your meals so that you're using the same ingredients. The reason for planning your meals is so that you know exactly what you need to buy, and it prevents food waste. And if you plan meals that have similar ingredients in them, it means that you're not using half of something and leave it festering in the fridge. You can use it for another meal and prevent food waste. Welcome to my freezer. Tip number 8 is love your freezer. I'm not talking about a big, massive chest freezer. That's a bit of a luxury for me. I'd love one of those. But I make do with the bottom half of this fridge freezer, and in there I'm able to get loads, like a month's worth of meat and ingredients. I used to turn my nose up at frozen veg that was prepped for me, but actually I've discovered them in lockdown. They are brilliant, they taste really good, and they save a whole lot of time, which is really crucial if you're trying to avoid takeaway. You can also get chopped herbs and chopped garlic and chopped chili. So they're brilliant for ingredients, and also they're brilliant for storing batch cooked meals, which leads me on to tip number 9. So tip 9 is batch cooking and dump bags. I love my freezer because it helps me to batch cook. Why cook a meal that you can eat once when you can make extra and batch cook? So these are a couple of curries and Mexican sauces. You may notice I've frozen them flat. They're portioned out, so there's enough there for, I think that's meals for 2. And a fajita sauce there. they're there, they're portioned out, they're frozen flat, and they're not really taking up that much space in the freezer at all. You can do that really, really simply. My only tip is, if you're going to make double and have intentional leftovers, take out what you want to freeze, because in my experience, if the food is there, the family will eat it. Also, dump bags. These are brilliant. So these are bags where you put all the raw ingredients into a bag, and you can either freeze it to defrost later. So this is a barbecue bag. It's got all of our meat for a family barbecue. Or you can do slow cooker meals. So you put all the raw ingredients into it, you freeze it flat, take it out the night before, and then put it in your slow cooker to cook while you're doing your day's stuff. The 10th and final tip is, from your freezer you can have your emergency ready meals. These are meals that you've cooked yourself, you know exactly what's gone in them, and these are for the nights when you're like, I really just don't fancy cooking. You can go to the freezer, you can grab out something. We will frequently have a fake away that is chicken curry with a vegetable curry and vegetable bhajis and some dal on the side as well. It's a proper feast. It feels like we've gone to the takeaway, but it's not really cost us anything. So there you have it, my top 10 tips on how to eat well on a budget. I hope you found them really, really helpful. It's not rocket science. You just need to plan ahead a bit and be strict with what you buy.